we got it. All right, guys. So Vitalik gave a nice shout out to ERC 7683 and the intent-based interop architecture, which is something I'm going to be talking about here. Got a lot to get through. It's going to be kind of fun. I'm giving the same presentation later today at DevCon on the main stage. So this is like you guys get the early preview. Okay, so let's set this up with just the stage of what's happened here. So 4 years ago, Ethereum had this scaling problem. And if you guys remember, we had about 15 transactions per second flowing through the network. And at times during DeFi summer, it cost like $50 to do a swap. It was unusable. And Vitalik and others, right, organized around this roll-up centric roadmap. Very much what AltLayer is all about, what many people in this room are all working on. And this strategy worked. So Vitalik had some fun slides showing how much cheaper things have gotten. But like, look at our roadmap here. October, roll-up centric roadmap gets published by V. Optimism goes live in a permissioned way a few months after that. Arbitrum goes live a few months after that. ZK Sync a year later or two. We've got ZK rollups happening. And then earlier this year, we have 4844 and blobs come online, which dramatically lower the fees of L2s. And like look at that chart. We're up and to the right. We scaled by 25x, 30x already, and we got a shitload more room to scale just by adding more L2s and L3s. And any individual rollup is now as fast and cheap as the Solana-like experience. So like this is something that I think Ethereum doesn't get enough credit for. Vitalik literally said this just a few minutes ago, but like we solved the hard problem here. The problem, well, we solved the hard problem. Good, celebrate it. The problem though is that solving the hard problem gave us a new hard problem. And the new hard problem is that Ethereum is fragmented. You have all these L2s and L3s, and like, well, let's talk about the problem. It was like the world was so simple back when we had one chain. It was such a nice time. You had one chain, you had MetaMask, you clicked one button, and it did the thing on the one chain, which is Ethereum, and you knew what it was going to do, and it worked, and it was in one spot. It just was slow and expensive, but it was simple. And now we have all these chains. We have all these chains, and we have like switched networks a million times, and then we've got like 15 versions of Ethereum, and it is a total mess, right? And like we got to admit that it's a pretty horrible user experience right now. And what we got to do is we got to unify Ethereum. This is what I want the shelling point coming out of DevCon this year to be. 2025 is the year to unify Ethereum. We got roadmap for scaling. Vitalik talked about that. Making user security better, all those other things, but interoperability here is going to be key if we're going to really make this work. We got to make Ethereum feel like one chain again. And my vision here is it's like you click buttons, you click one button, and it does the thing you want on the Ethereum network, regardless of where it lives. Okay, so there are a few components to how we do this. You're going to need better app and wallet UX. I actually think account abstraction, and we'll talk more about this later with the Petra hard fork, account abstraction and EIP 7702 is going to be key to us unifying these chains. And we need fast bridging. We need this thing to be fast. And I'm going to focus on the speed aspect of this, why like interop needs to be fast. And in my opinion, it's got to be 2 seconds fast. Not 20 seconds, not 2 minutes, certainly not 2 minutes, certainly not 20 minutes. It's got to be 2 seconds. And am I making that number up? Like, yeah, I am kind of making that number up, but it is based off of a lot of Web2 UX research. Like Google's done a lot of studies that if your website loads in more than 2 seconds, users just bounce. They just go away. And I think we got some crypto OGs, we all think like, hey, we're used to things just taking minutes. But that's not the consumer experience that's going to scale to the next billion users. So I'm focused on this 2 second number. Later on, we'll be focused on the 200 millisecond number, so it's like imperceptibly fast. But like right now, 2 seconds is like the psychological barrier that I think is going to keep users like engaged and really create this unified experience. Okay, so my view is that this intent architecture, they are the only viable mechanism that can give us this 2 second experience. I gotta tell you guys how it works, though, for you to understand it. So let's talk about a traditional bridge flow first. So a traditional bridge flow, user deposits their assets on chain A. So my chains here are Arbitrum, A, base, B. So we're gonna go A to B. So users deposit assets on Arbitrum, and then we gotta wait for finality. We gotta make sure that those assets are actually on Arbitrum before we can do the next step in this traditional bridge. And this is the problem, we'll get to it. So we'll wait for finality or a sense of finality, and then we send a message using some messaging protocol. And maybe this has bad security assumptions we don't like, maybe it doesn't, but like leave that aside for now. I gotta send a message to base, and then once I get to base, then I send the funds to the user. Okay, that works. It's like conceptually simple, but it's slow. Like it's just too slow. It does not give us this 2-second experience, mainly from the finality issues to start. So what's the alternative? The alternative is this intent flow, something that we've been working on a cross protocol. And so intents work differently here. So the user still does a transaction on the origin chain, of course, but here their funds are gonna go into an escrow contract that's gonna hold them safe. And then that same transaction that deposited funds into escrow is going to broadcast this quote unquote intent, which we're going to talk about. It broadcasts that intent to a network of solvers. These are third-party actors that are economically incentivized to fill the user on the destination chain. You can kind of think of them as like miners that are economically incentivized to build blocks. Here, these are solvers, they're economically incentivized to go and fill the user on the destination chain. And so they race to fill the user with their own funds. This is the core component here. They're filling the user with their own funds on the destination chain, and it's a race. And because it's a race, these solvers can actually compete to take on finality risk. They can price that finality risk in a marketplace where the person that fills the user fastest is going to get the fee that the user paid for this transaction. And they can decide, like, oh, Arbitrum pre-confirmation came in, do I trust it, yes or no, for this amount? And if they trust it, they can basically immediately fill the user. And so this is cool because it's fast. The user gets filled in 2 seconds, like really fast, sometimes less. And as block times get shorter, this gets faster and faster. Of course, user gets their fast fill, but we still gotta like pay the solver back. So after the user is filled, the protocol then releases the funds. It quote unquote verifies the intent was filled, and then it releases the funds back to the solver that fronted money. We'll talk about this a little bit more. This is what I kind of call the settlement system, this process of escrowing funds and then releasing them after the user, after the fill is verified. We'll call that the settlement system. We'll get into that. So, okay. So this intent-based bridging architecture is what across, I mean, I'm slightly biased. I think we are the leading intent-based bridging architecture. We have a median fill time right now between L2s of 3 seconds on all transactions less than $10,000. This is in production. How many people have used Across, actually? Got a few? All right, a few in the audience. If you guys go to across.to, you can use the app. If you go between Arbitrum and Base, you'll get a 2-second fill. Uniswap also just integrated us into their front end. So if you go to Uniswap and swap assets between chains, it's using Across under the hood for this same user experience. So 3-second fill, the average fee that's paid on transactions less than $10,000 is like 4 cents, less than 4 cents. It's getting absurdly cheap. And we've processed billions of dollars in volume, and this is growing quite a bit these days. So I think today we did 50 million of volume over like 50,000 transactions, and that number's up into the right as L2s grow. So this is working in production, and we got lots of good data on it. But like, we think that if there's not going to be one protocol that wins interop, it's got to be like a standard. Just like how we had the roll-up centric architecture and many teams compete to build great roll-ups, we think there's got to be like an architectural design and many teams competing to solve interoperability. And so we're introducing, or we've written a standard that we call ERC 7683. We co-authored this standard with Uniswap, and this is a standard for cross-chain intents. And Vitalik mentioned this in his presentation. And I'll go into like how we've kind of trying to build support for this idea. But I want to be clear that 7683, it's not about Across, it's not about Uniswap. It is truly an open standard. It mirrors a lot of the architectural decisions Across has used, And we hope to be a leading provider in this standard, but it's not about us, right? So what does 7683 mean? What does this standard do? And the mental model that I have is it's like an order ticket. You can almost go back to TradFi days where an old 80s broker would write down on a piece of paper what their client's trade is, and that trade ticket would go to some guy that would then go into a pit and make hand motions to what they wanted to buy. It's almost that kind of concept here too. And we're defining an order ticket that in some ways is pretty simple. It's origin chain, origin token, origin amount, destination, chain token amount, a couple other things that I'll get into. And this is stylized, but this is roughly what the standard does. And what you do is you go and you fill in your order ticket with what you want to do, and you send it to this solver network, and it should just work. It just gets filled. Let's talk about a couple of cool features here. So a couple cool things. We got this fill instructions field here, kind of like a memo field in this standard. It lets us do other things. We can put call data in there, that the solver, when they fill the user on the destination chain, they do something here. So one thing they can do, they could swap on Uniswap. I could go and buy Frog token after I bridge an ETH. Or I could buy an NFT. Or I could deposit into a vault. So one click in my dApp, I could have a one-click button where I bridge assets from Arbitrum straight into Aave's deposit pool on Base, or whatever it might be. So seamless, kind of one-click cross-chain experiences. And then what's really cool, and this is a whole other talk that I don't have time to get into, but what's really cool is when we have ubiquitous account abstraction, we can include in that memo field a 7702 message that's a signature the user gave to do an arbitrary action on the destination chain. And in this setup, this intent structure, we bridge that message over to the destination chain, and it effectively looks like your home chain becomes this universal gas tank that can pay for your execution of any message on any chain. And I think this is pretty cool. This is something that, again, subject to a whole other talk, but the fact that we could include in the payload this account abstraction message, I think is pretty powerful. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, this standard also modularizes, hard word to say, modularizes the settlement system too. So in the construct, in the standard, we specify a contract that is your settlement contract or your settlement system. And as I mentioned before, this is the thing that's going to hold the user funds in escrow on the origin chain and only release them to the solver after we verify the intent was filled. And what's so cool about making this a module is that it can be transparently upgraded to support whatever the best technology is for quote-unquote verifying intents over time. So across has a version today that I'm not going to talk about, but it's worked pretty well for a couple years in production. But we can use Optimism's superchain native interop if we wanted to. If the origin and destination chains were both superchains, then we could write a settlement contract that uses Optimism superchain's native interop when it's live to pay the solver back faster, which will make intents cheaper here. So we keep the same speed advantages, but we can make the whole thing just cheaper. And we could plug in a Polygon ZAG layer, right? If the two origin and destination chains are AG layer chains too, do the same thing here. Coinbase is working on this cool idea called RIP 7755, which is kind of like a nested storage proof concept that is a trust minimized way to move messages between L2s. We could plug that in here too. And again, if the two chains support that, plug in this settlement layer as well. And so what I love about this concept is that 7683 can support any settlement system. Again, we talked about Superchain, 7755, Egg Layer, Elastic Chain, Succinct SP1, Chainlink, CCIP, Wormhole, Layer 0, Hyperlane, doesn't matter. Whatever we come up with, we could write a settlement contract that utilizes that if it's the best settlement system for that route. Okay, so why is this standard helpful? For developers, both app and wallet developers, they now get a single common format to do anything cross-chain. It's only one integration that's necessary. And for solvers now, we've defined a common format, so solvers only have to integrate with one thing. They listen to one standard format, rather than having to have a custom integration with all these other intent protocols that I expect to emerge. Okay, so We co-authored the standard with Uniswap. Across and Uniswap co-authored the standard. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from many people. Recently merged in much of the feedback about 2 weeks ago. So if you previously looked at the standard, go check it out again. ERC7683.org has all the details. But we've gotten a lot of teams to support us. So Optimism early on understood that even though they're working on superchain interop, they still need a way to get assets outside of the superchain onto their chains. And they've been supportive of the 7683 standard. And Polygon on their egg layer, they see the same vision. They're supportive of it. And then I'm just going to flip through, like, we got Linea's support, Alchemy, Blast, Conduit, Manta, Grow the Pie, Mantle, Mode, Tyco, Superseed, WorldCoin, Coney, Scroll, Olayer, Nethermind, Olayer on there. Let's sit on Olayer. Good job, Olayer. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your support. Aori, Fluent, Subwallet, Open Social, Zero Dev, Rhinestone. We had a whole bunch, right? What's cool is, like, I had this slide, and there's this hole here. It didn't look very good because we were missing this one. But the advantage of conferences like this is you go and you meet the last people that need a little bit more convincing. And it's pretty cool because we have both Arbitrum and ZK Sync also now supportive of the standard. So we have almost universal support across the L2 ecosystem for a standard, which I did not think was necessarily possible. And it's pretty cool. So again, not going to say the thing is perfect. We still want feedback on how this works. But I do think it's pretty cool how we've been able to build support for this idea. Okay, so what's next? I'm almost at time, but what's next is ERC 7683 has broad support. We have the major L2 ecosystems, all the minor ones, a bunch of other intent protocols, thinking that this is a good idea. They're just basically saying, like, just like ERC 20 is defined a standard for tokens, let's define a standard for intents, and let's kind of align ourselves around that. And I think that means that there's kind of increasing awareness that this intent-based bridging architecture is the right architecture for unifying Ethereum, for that 2-second interop experience. And now we got to do the dApp and wallet UX patterns to make this easy and make it really easy for developers to integrate this standard. And then the thing that I'm most interested looking forward is once we have ubiquitous smart accounts via 7702, which is coming in the Petra hard fork next quarter, we're going to have the groundwork here for seamless chain abstraction. And I think this is the next thing that I'm really excited to look forward to is, like, we'll add together 4-digit numbers. What happens when you take 7683 and add 7702? And there's going to be some other 4-digit numbers we're going to add in there too. What happens if we do that? Can we get the experience that actually does unify Ethereum? I'm at time, but yeah, guys. I am Hal2001 on Twitter. Give me a follow. Go try out Across if you haven't. And thank you very much.